Police Airport Bureau.
This call grounded a commercial flight.
Hi there. I'm really getting frustrated here. My daughter just called me like 10 minutes ago, crying on the phone, saying that her flight was getting hijacked.
Flight is getting hijacked.
She was crying. She said they were holding them hostage and that they were being pushed to the back of the plane and one of them had a bomb.
It was made by a teenager in a group that spent their days sending bomb threats to schools and airports. When he got caught, all he cared about was the attention.
Is this going up on the national currency Twitter feed?
And one other thing too.
I take like the vitamin D supplement things. So like, because I don't go outside often.
Most of the group got locked up. One kid got 3 years, another got 8 after they found hundreds of explicit images of children on his computer. But one member was never named or charged. He just vanished. Until 5 years later, a new handle started appearing on breach forums, posting stolen data from AT&T, then Volvo, then the US Department of Defense, then Apple, AMD, Cisco, Europol. Over 80 public leaks, and he claimed the private number was north of 400. He called himself IntelBroker. And when the owner of breach forums got arrested, he took over the entire operation, then did his first interview on a tiny podcast. Speaking AI-generated German he didn't understand,
Da ich damals in Serbien einfach nur als normaler Netzwerktechniker gearbeitet hatte.
Claiming he was a Serbian technician hiding out in Russia. But for a big scary Russian hacker, he sure did have a funny hobby, showing up on a Minecraft YouTuber's channel to help destroy a pay-to-win server.
He's speaking in tongues.
Nobody knew his name. Not the FBI, not Europol, not the private investigators from the hundreds of companies that he burned. But they were all watching, hoping he'd slip.
Oh yeah, by the way, Mr. US government, this is an interview. I'm a journalist.
This is the story of IntelBroker. From bomb threats, to hacking the world's biggest companies, to taunting law enforcement on Twitter with full confidence that he'd never be caught. IntelBroker put a massive target on his back when he took over breach forums in August of 2024. If you've been following my series on breach forums, you know how brazen this is. In 2022, the US went over the ocean to arrest the creator of the forum, Diogo. They had been monitoring him for years, waiting for him to turn 18 and leave Portugal. He was busted when he flew into the UK to see his sick mother. Then in 2023, after Connor Brian Fitzpatrick took over the forum, the feds sent FBI agents disguised as postal workers delivering packages to his house. Like, you run this forum, you're getting busted no matter what country you're from as a guarantee. That's because breach forums has become the main hub for selling stolen data from the world's largest companies and government agencies. The US has been the target of numerous, deeply embarrassing and damaging breaches posted to the forum. Yet each time an owner has been arrested, another seemingly much more sophisticated cybercriminal has stepped up to take over running the forum. After Connor, it settled on IntelBroker. And for many in the cybersecurity community, it seemed he might be the one that was actually impervious to US law enforcement. That's because he has a long history of causing chaos to governments over the internet for profit. Tracing his handle backwards on the internet leads us to his first known alias, Partial Duplex. It's tied to a criminal case, but he was never indicted. His real name does not appear anywhere in the documents. What does appear is a hacking group known as Apathist Squad, a gang of young men from the US and the UK. I don't think it's fair to call them hackers, but they were definitely inspired by anarchy groups like Lizard Squad. Heck, they named themselves after the ancient Egyptian deity representing chaos and destruction. See, the squad wasn't breaching databases or writing malware. They were spamming bomb threats to schools, making up the most horrific threats imaginable to cause mass panic. In one case, they impersonated a bullied student, claiming he was coming to school with 3 bombs and a .22 handgun. In another, they threatened a campus with ANFO bombs, PVC pipe bombs, RPG heads that they said they were going to place under school buses, and landmines on the sports field. As you can imagine, all these things had to be checked, regardless if they thought the threat was actually credible. And they were mainly sending these by email. They had learned how to spoof the sender. It's pretty trivial to do, but they would make them appear like they were coming from the Mayor of London, for example. But more often than not, these threats stemmed from disputes with others on Minecraft PvP servers. So they'd spoof the emails to be coming from Mineplex, Velt PvP, Zonic, And when the staff of Zonic made fun of them after their first attacks, the squad made a blanket threat to dox all of their players and start swatting them. They were bragging about all of this publicly on Twitter, of course, and it wasn't an empty threat because these guys truly did commit a ton of bomb hoaxes across the US and the UK. At one point, they were even advertising it as a free service on their Twitter. But this wasn't all that they were up to. They were also DDoSing websites for attention. Sites like Krebs on Security, the DEF CON website, various government agencies, Proton Mail, and a car news website which they tried to extort $20,000 out of to stop the attack. They also defaced an education website and made threats that they were going to leak a US military database. At the height of all of this, one of their members, he went by the name Trident, but it's written in leet speak, personally called the FBI and started claiming credit for all of it. Maybe as like a haha, you can't catch me. He went on to directly threaten the FBI, threatening to bring dispersal weapons containing Ebola and anthrax into their office, threatened to assault and kill the FBI agent's wife, who had picked up the phone to deal with him, declared that he was going to set off a pipe bomb at LAX and at his own school. He even said that he was going to stab his own mother. Oh, and he also called an airport and falsely reported a hijacking on a flight from London to San Francisco, of which they promptly posted about on their Twitter.
Hello, Police Airport Bureau.
They were holding them hostage and that they were being pushed to the back of the plane and one of them had a bomb.
I'm
Ones
just
look
there.
plastic, like plastic looking. They don't look like metal, like shiny or anything. They look plastic. One of the men had a bomb and then it just cut out.
But maybe this wasn't such a smart idea because they eventually did make a mistake that would reveal their identities. See, while they were busy DDoSing Proton Mail, the group had been using Proton Mail's VPN to try to mask who they were. You can take a guess at what company helped get them busted. And while IntelBroker walked away from all of this with no jail time, his fellow squad members were not so lucky. Trident got 3 years behind bars. When the police arrested him in Watford, he looked calm and simply asked if he was going to be on the National Crime Agency's Twitter feed. His American counterpart, who went by the handle Wanted by Feds, got it worse. The FBI had found nearly 200 explicit images of children on his devices. That got his sentence bumped to almost 8 years. But as for IntelBroker, then operating under the handle Partial Duplex, the records just have him listed as an unindicted member of the group. He was spared any public repercussions. Why? What deal had he arrived at with the feds? What was his relationship to them? Those are questions that can't be answered without knowing who IntelBroker really is. But for now, we might conclude that he got away and felt invincible, and so he decided that he was going to up the ante, start using these skills for profit. Speaking of profit, if IntelBroker knew what cybersecurity jobs were paying today, he might have just gone legit, which brings us to today's video sponsor, TryHackMe. It's the world's largest hands-on training platform with over 7 million users globally. That's because they're not just some boring theory course. TryHackMe is completely free to start and runs right in your browser, giving you the tools to hack real machines they've set up. Real machines you actually learn by doing. When I went to school for this stuff, it was all theory. Better yet, their fully structured roadmap keeps track of your progress and achievements, taking you from zero hacking knowledge all the way to being job ready for some of the world's top cybersecurity positions. Plus, if you ever get stuck, their Echo AI tutor is available 24/7 to provide step-by-step help in simple terms. The biggest thing here though is that they offer verifiable certifications, built with companies like Salesforce and Accenture. This helps make you stand out to employers. Like you're actually working towards recognized industry certifications, the gold standard. And with their premium plan, you get access to faster machines, unlimited lab time, and a 15% discount on top cybersecurity professional certifications. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to tryhackme.com/crumb to get 30% off their annual premium plan. That's a total steal for anyone looking to build a career in cybersecurity. Fast forward 5 years from the squad getting busted, IntelBroker had become infamous enough from his hacks to be invited on the German podcast Inside Darknet. Speaking AI-generated German, he claimed he was a Serbian technician now hiding out in Russia.
Ich habe mit 20 Jahren mit dem Hacken angefangen. Ich wusste anfangs nicht, wo ich genau anfangen sollte.
Shared how it all started, said he gained his hacking skills at the age of 20 by reverse engineering and writing cheats for games such as Fortnite and Rust. In another podcast with DoingFedTime, he wanted to say that his Asperger's syndrome, narcissism, and alcoholism helped him hone these skills.
How did you go about actually developing your skills in hacking and cybersecurity? Asperger's.
He's likely playing into the cliche here, but he's also probably being a little bit earnest. By this time, he was a well-feared cybercriminal, had racked up over 80 public leaks of stolen data from many of the biggest American companies and government agencies, and claimed to have stolen and sold information on more than 400 through private sales. That makes these podcasts a bit of an anomaly. Normally, someone of his profile wouldn't be talking to different YouTubers. But it really helps us understand his early days. After the bust of his group in 2019, he was done with the threats and the DDoS attacks.
Motivations for getting involved in the whole hacking scene and whatnot. Money and needing to deal with rent and living expenses.
One night while drinking, he came up with the name IntelBroker because his primary focus had shifted to hacking and leaking government intelligence data. And since he didn't like US influence, thought the US government was hypocritical for arresting hackers, he decided that he would primarily target American companies and government agencies. And so for IntelBroker, this was the start of a new chapter. He registered an account on BreachForums under this handle, complete with a Serbian flag as the profile picture. But like any good hacker, he had to build a reputation. One of the first notable things he did on the forum to achieve this was share some custom malware that he wrote. He called it Endurance Ransomware, but it was actually a wiper tool, type of malware designed to permanently destroy data. The Department of Defense Cybercrime Center actually confirmed that Endurance was used in hacks against several US government agencies, and now he was giving it away for free to other members on the forum. At the same time, he was breaking into and stealing data from all sorts of small companies and agencies, but nothing really of note, nothing that would get big media attention. But then he had a breakthrough in January of 2023 when he hit one of the biggest telecommunication companies in the world, AT&T, stealing 37 million records from its database. The entire premise of BreachForums is to be a marketplace to sell stolen data to other hackers so they can use it to commit their attacks. For example, a SIM swapper would be very interested in this database because it would help them steal crypto. Heck, pretty much every cybercriminal I've covered on my channel uses stolen data in one way or another to commit their attack. Now's a good time to subscribe. And it seemed with each new breach, IntelBroker was upping the ante. His next target was Volvo. He gained remote access to the Swedish car manufacturer and began selling its internal vehicle data on the dark web for $2,500. Then in February 2023, he found his way into the servers running the grocery delivery service, We. He stole data from 11 million orders, including the full names, emails, phone numbers, and device types of those users. This one blew up in the media. Like the others, IntelBroker had posted the database on BreachForums, but this time he wasn't charging any money for it. Anyone on the website could download it using credits on BreachForums. Credits were a way that you got awarded for contributing, and in return you could download other members posting breaches for essentially free. If you didn't contribute, you could buy credits for a couple of dollars, which supported the website. As you know, I've posted 2 other videos on BreachForums. Those go much deeper into the culture. For now, IntelBroker was a rising star within the community, but as he continued to hack bigger and bigger companies and agencies, it wasn't just going to be his fellow hackers envying him. It meant that more security researchers and law enforcement agencies would be trying to find out who he was behind the alias, and that was going to test his operational security. By 2023, IntelBroker's playbook was simple. Hack a company, threaten to release their data unless they paid him. In those cases where they didn't pay up, he'd make good on that threat by posting their information to BreachForums. At first, his targets were smaller stakes, companies that he was trying to ransom for a few $1,000s, but over time they grew bigger and bigger. In March of 2023, his next target became DC HealthLink, an American health insurance marketplace based in Washington, DC, used by House and staff members of the US government. And this time it wasn't grocery orders, it was their names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, phone numbers. The politicians were outraged. The then Democratic leader and speaker demanded answers on the breach. All the while, IntelBroker was trying to sell it all on BreachForums for $4,000. When a reputable member offered to buy it, it was an easy deal. But then the next day, some news broke. The FBI was telling the media that they had been the ones to purchase the data. The way these deals work is that when you sell the data to another hacker, you're meant to permanently delete it so you no longer have a copy. The FBI and big companies have been known to purchase data off of BreachForums in hopes that the person selling it will actually make that deletion. IntelBroker told Inside Darknet after this news broke, he started cyberbullying and trolling the member that had purchased the data, now knowing that it was the FBI. He said they promptly blocked him. This entire entire controversy just launched him into the stratosphere. Investigators wanted him more than ever, and other hacking groups wanted him on their team. He got invited to a hacking collective formerly known as the Boys, who had rebranded themselves to I can't even say this. Let's just call them Cyber Neighbors. The name change was supposed to prove that they weren't federal agents, because apparently that's how you do it, by being racist. IntelBroker told Inside Darknet,
Literally 2022 November time. I just finished my studies and my job took a nosedive. I needed money, so I started looking for places that accepted data that I had to sell.
he knew these guys not as friends, but well enough to trust that they weren't federal agents. So he started collaborating with them, but kept his distance, made it very clear that his IntelBroker alias was not synonymous with the group. He was his own operation. But as this is coming together, BreachForums gets seized just weeks after the DC HealthLink hack. Some think that it's related. The then owner, Connor Brian Fitzpatrick, was arrested. The website was yanked offline and replaced with this takedown notice, complete with Connor's avatar, pom-pom purring, and handcuffs. And then nothing. The website remained offline. But there's so many hacking groups that make their money by selling stolen data, they needed a place to trade it. Eventually, a group known as Shiny Hunters stepped up. They brought the forum back online with the help of others, including IntelBroker. IntelBroker wasn't yet running the forum, but he was participating in it with his new group, and they went right back to work. Sometimes with the group, more often alone, the pace started to pick up. Every few weeks, another massive leak would drop, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. In July 2023, he obtained the source code, encryption keys, databases, and back-end credentials for the gaming hardware company Razer, asking $100,000 in Monero. 2 months later, 200,000 entries of personal data from Facebook Marketplace went up for sale. And before the year was even over, IntelBroker had landed 3 more hits. First, General Electric, then DARPA, the US government's own self-defense research and development agency, and finally, the United States Department of Defense. Confidential documents, communications between the Pentagon and the military, all up for sale. Just think about that for a second. IntelBroker was burning through the most powerful institutions on Earth, one after another, and nobody could seem to stop him. Going into 2024, the streak wasn't slowing down either. The international consulting firm Robert Half was breached. This is bad because they interact with so many big companies. The Chinese e-commerce shipping platform PandaBuy, Los Angeles International Airport. For the US, this had become a matter of national security, and not just because of the companies that had already been targeted. They were starting to question where IntelBroker was actually operating out of. See, in March 2024, IntelBroker agreed to do an interview with the Cyber Express, but the publication expanded and reworded his responses for what they called contextual clarity, which didn't sit well with him. Still, the interview gave him a platform to squash one rumor that had been circulating, that he was linked to Iranian state-sponsored hacking groups. The confusion came from his Endurance Wiper tool. The code had resemblance to Shamoon, a virus famously used in attacks by Iranian hackers. IntelBroker dismissed it outright, and right after the interview, he went right back to work. Leaked data from Acuity, a federal US contractor that had data from ICE and the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. Then he targeted SpaceEyes, a geospatial intelligence firm, exposing national security data. And to top it all off, Home Depot and their employees' private information got caught up in the mix and leaked too, because why not? To celebrate this streak, IntelBroker took a little break by popping on a YouTube video by the Duper Trooper, a channel dedicated to destroying pay-to-win servers. The premise of this one was that a real hacker would come on and help him break the server. In the beginning, IntelBroker couldn't even play though, because he used Cubes, a privacy-focused operating system, and he couldn't launch Minecraft on it. First, he had to spin up a virtual machine to get into the game, but once he joined, his username was Thick. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know about the OG handles to hacker pipeline. Having that name in Minecraft could cost $10,000, $20,000, and these names are often traded with stolen currency among sim swappers. That'd be a good time to hit that subscribe button. IntelBroker was able to find a dupe on the server, replicate the most valuable items over and over again, crashing the server's economy. And here and there, IntelBroker is speaking Russian, or at least what sounds like him speaking Russian to someone that doesn't actually speak Russian.
Mr. Intel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Which brings us right back to the question at the center of this entire story, that no security researcher or journalist or law enforcement agency had been able to publicly answer. Who is IntelBroker? He claimed on Inside Darknet to be Serbian, said he was hiding in Russia, spoke AI-generated German, and is now on a Minecraft Let's Play, had racked up over 80 public leaks of companies, agencies, military systems, and claimed that the private number was north of 400. To answer this question, we have to go even deeper. The thing about hacking is that it isn't magic. Every breach has a method. Sometimes they identify hacking groups based on the way that they breach systems over and over again. There's a pattern, a fingerprint. So the next best step to find out who is pulling off a hack is to understand how they're pulling off a hack. Even after Connor was arrested, IntelBroker didn't seem to be scared for his own safety, despite the FBI now having BreachForum's entire database in their possession. Every post, private message, login record, on and on. This is the exact method they used to catch Connor in the first place, combing through his private messages from back when Diogo owned the forum, where they found Connor had revealed an email address containing his real name. IntelBroker had years of activity on the forum. If he had slipped up even once, they'd have it now. But instead of hiding, IntelBroker was being more brazen than ever, because in May 2024, he leaked classified data from Europol in this big public show, saying that he wanted to punish them for targeting breach forums, and in his eyes, Europol was running on double standards, committing the same kinds of actions as cybercriminals but never facing consequences. He saw himself as the one holding them accountable.
Why hit them? Why not? F them. They're evil and don't deserve to live. They need to be punished for attacking the Breach Forum's community. They commit crimes daily, but we're not allowed to? Talk about double standards.
Meanwhile, no one could seem to hold him accountable, because through spring and summer of 2024, the leaks just kept coming. HSBC Bank, Barclays Bank, AMD, Apple, Born Group, United Arab Emirates, Lulu Hypermarket. But how was he able to do all this? The first articles from security researchers looking into his method started to come out. They found that IntelBroker wasn't some elite hacker finding private zero-day exploits to break his way in. His approach is actually quite novice. He used two known methods in tandem. The first was abusing stealer logs. These were one of the most popular types of stolen data sold on breach forums. It comes from people accidentally running info-stealer malware. I get at least an email a day from fake sponsors with brand packages, but it's actually just one of these viruses zipped up and disguised as a PDF. Once the malware is run on your machine, it scoops up and sends back all of your browser cookies, session tokens, autofill data. The list goes on and on. Then a hacker can replicate all of that data on their own machine and log in like they are you, circumventing any two-factor authentication. IntelBroker would grab massive collections of these logs, then use search tools like ripgrep to comb through millions of entries, specifically looking for admin accounts, corporate emails, patterns associated with private systems, and backend infrastructure. Once he had those credentials, he'd just try logging in. Out of millions of records, he was able to get into a few hundred companies worth his time. But that's not the full story, because once inside, he would kick off a second method. He would abuse his first layer of access to look for things like exposed code repositories, Git servers, GitHub, GitLab. Then he'd use a Git dumper to clone everything, download the entire source code of a company, then search through it for hard-coded credentials. Software has to talk to databases, and it uses passwords and usernames to do that. So if he could find those in the code, he could access the database, steal all their private customer information. It's almost backwards from how we think about hacking. He wasn't picking a target company, then trying to find a way in. He was looking for vulnerabilities en masse, then taking advantage of whatever company came up. If that company happened to be a contractor or a vendor of a much larger corporation, even better. He could abuse their access to get into the bigger company that otherwise wasn't so susceptible to the first layer of his attack, because they've got bigger budget for better security. And this was the story with IntelBroker's breaches time and time again. But it didn't sit well with everybody, especially hackers who loved the traditional meaning of the word. One, who went by the handle Emo, labeled his tactics mundane and easy, basically called him out for not being a real hacker, saying IntelBroker was a glorified skid or script kiddie. Emo even claimed that IntelBroker was marking data as sold even when no one had bought it, to keep up with his persona, to try and create more fear for the companies he broke into. Still, while not the most sophisticated, IntelBroker must have had strong confidence in his operational security to actually do this without fear of getting caught. See, the trouble with hacking is that you're playing for keeps. You only have to make one mistake one time for law enforcement to bust you, and if the target on his back wasn't big enough already, it was time for him to take over running BreachForums. In August 2024, Shiny Hunters stepped down, made a vague statement that they were retiring, but it was okay because they were passing on ownership of the forum to the most prolific member, IntelBroker. Now in charge of the entire community, the feds would consider him the facilitator for every data breach sold on the forum, and the sole target to shut down the entire website. On top of that, his fellow hackers had to trust that he wouldn't abuse his position, ban the competition, sell their data to the feds, or whatever other nefarious activities one could think up. For example, when Diogo was running the forum, he would create secret accounts, scam users trying to buy data, and then ban that member before they could complain. He accidentally did this to an undercover agent trying to buy stolen credit card details that never existed. That made him a tricky one to bust. But IntelBroker never had a problem acquiring stolen data, and his new position of power wasn't going to slow him down. Come October, IntelBroker and two partners breached Cisco, the company whose hardware runs near every network on the planet. At first, Cisco denied it, so IntelBroker started mocking them on Twitter. Finally, Cisco admitted to the attack, but they tried to downplay it. So again, IntelBroker took to Twitter, claiming that he stole over 800 gigabytes of information. He claimed that Cisco even wanted to pay him to delete the data, but instead, he put up a poll on his Twitter asking his followers whether he should just release it all for free. He was toying with them, and in the meantime, posting a ton of new breaches. Yeah, his new position running BreachForums really wasn't slowing him down. Come Christmas 2024, he had one more trick up his sleeve, just to make sure that the Cisco incident response team didn't get to have any break. That's when he posted a bunch of their stolen data. Motivated by enough money to live, infamy, and the thrill of the hack, it was around this time that he went on the podcast with DoingFedTime. He said that he had no remorse.
How do you justify your actions? Or do you?
None at all. I'm a criminal, a racist, and highly prolific when it comes to leaking people's information.
Explained that the only line he drew was to not target health companies and children. Everything else was fair game, especially American companies, as we know. He said he would spend whole days just breaching, doing nothing else. But it was taking its mental toll. When DoingFedTime asked if he had any advice to give, IntelBroker said, "Don't become a big, scary, famous hacker. The mental stress and paranoia isn't worth it." To cope, he abused alcohol. It worked for a while, but now at the start of 2025, he was feeling burned out. Being constantly hunted is not a sustainable way of life. And so he started to think of retirement, that is, to stop hacking as a criminal. Come January 2025, he actually made an announcement on BreachForums that he would be stepping down as owner, passing the reins over to somebody else. He even told DoingFedTime that he would like to secure a sustainable future, working a real job as a programmer or in cybersecurity.
Leaving like this world of cybercrime? If so, like what would prompt that actual decision?
I'm getting close to it, having extreme burnout and wanting to pursue a job in red teaming or programming and setting up a future. Perhaps a child would be great.
But in January and February of 2025, he did pull off a few more leaks, but the consistency was definitely gone. He was slowly disappearing from the scene, just like he promised in his resignation post. But just running from his past didn't mean it wouldn't catch up. Turns out, IntelBroker's paranoia was justified, because while he was busy breaching Cisco and running BreachForums, the FBI had quietly been building a case against him for over a year. And it started with the dumbest mistake imaginable. IntelBroker put a new listing on BreachForums, selling a company's private API key for $250. He wanted payment in Monero, a privacy-focused crypto specifically designed to be untraceable. But there was a buyer messaging him asking if he could pay in Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin Bitcoin is the opposite of private. Every single transaction is recorded on a public ledger. The feds can trace it back to cash out points, exchanges like Coinbase, and often find people's real identities. IntelBroker knew this well. He always insisted on Monero, but for whatever reason, this one time he made an exception. The money was sent and the key exchanged, along with 3 admin logins and a password. What IntelBroker didn't know was that the buyer was an undercover FBI agent. Of course, they immediately traced his address on the blockchain, and they found something very interesting. Before the undercover purchase, this wallet had received a tiny amount of Bitcoin from another wallet. They believed there was a high probability that IntelBroker had seeded this new wallet with funds from his old wallet. That's why it's the first transaction here, and that's all they really needed to secure a subpoena. They found that it was created in October of 2022 by a Ramp account. Ramp is an online bank, and to open a Ramp account, you need to verify your identity. This is exactly what the feds were hoping for. It's likely they had bought other data off him before this, but never before were able to actually get a trace back to something like this. One little subpoena later, they found the account was registered under a UK provisional driving license belonging to a 23-year-old man named Kai Logan West. The FBI kept digging. They found a Coinbase account linked to the same driver's license. It was created under the name Kyle Northern, but Coinbase requires identity verification, and when they checked, the real name on the account was Kai West. It's not a very distinct alias from his real name. And from this Coinbase account, they also got his email, kylenorthern1337@outlook.com. Naturally, they sent a subpoena to Microsoft, and what they found inside was more than comical. A photograph of his driver's license, selfies, screenshots with payment information under the name Kai West, receipts, a screenshot of an article about the FBI seizing breach forums, and a video showing how to use a DDoS tool. Oh, and a certificate of student status for the academic year 2023 and 2024, showing that Kai West was enrolled in a cybersecurity degree at a university in the United Kingdom. So the guy running breach forums, doing all these crazy hacks, was just a 23-year-old cybersecurity student. They found he even had public LinkedIns registered, one under his real name and one under his fake name, that he had gambled crypto on a CSGO themed website. But they didn't stop here, because the FBI needed to prove beyond any doubt that Kai West was indeed IntelBroker. The wallet link wasn't strong enough, so they cross-referenced his personal email activity with IntelBroker's post on breach forums. See, they knew that IntelBroker had a habit of sharing random YouTube videos on the forum, and so using his email to look at what he was watching on YouTube, they started trying to associate a pattern. They found on July 11, 2023, Kai watched a YouTube video titled "Kobo requested the Ara Ara" at 12:06 UTC. 3 minutes later, IntelBroker posted the exact video to breach forums. Then, on February 5th, 2024, Kai watched a music video to the song Dark Side at 1:14 UTC. 1 minute later, 1:15, IntelBroker posted it to the forum. Again, on April 6, 2024, he was listening to the song Kiss Me Again. Liked it so much he played it 3 times over, finishing at 5:17 UTC. A minute later, he shared it on the forum. This would be very compelling in front of a jury, trying to decide if IntelBroker was indeed Kai Logan West. But they weren't going to leave it up to that chance. So the feds kept digging. They found that Kai's email account had watched numerous videos about IntelBroker. In specific, the interview he had done with Inside Darknet was watched 4 times over. And remember, in that interview, he claimed he was Russian, living in Serbia. The FBI noted, based on all of Kai's email accounts, that he was clearly from the UK and spoke fluent English. They also matched the IP addresses. A Microsoft account registered to Kai's email was accessed from the exact same IP address used in the January 2023 hack of a victim company, during the exact same time frame that the hack took place. And the X account registered as IntelBroker was created from a VPN IP that also accessed Kai's personal email 22 times. At this point, they had no doubt. The prolific hacker who had breached hundreds of companies, taunted law enforcement, run breach forums, and called himself untouchable was Kai Logan West, a 23-year-old cybersecurity student from the UK. But the undercover purchase that exposed all of this had happened in January of 2024. By the time he was stepping down from breach forums, over a year had passed. He thought he might just wrap it all up and set sail into the sunset. Little did he know, the feds had collected all of this information, and now it was just a matter of time before that knock would come. Unless, of course, Kai had actually gone into hiding in some country that didn't comply with US extradition request. IntelBroker had posted this image taunting law enforcement on Twitter. then went dark for more than 4 months. For someone terminally online, this was beyond unusual. Members of BreachForums were wondering where he went. Security researchers were speculating his arrest, and others thought maybe he really did retire. Back on the forum, things were operating smoothly. A threat actor operating under the handle Anastasia had taken over after IntelBroker stepped down. But come late April, the forum inexplicitly went offline, then remained offline all through May. Hackers were speculating who took it down. Was it the administrators? Was it another threat group? Maybe even law enforcement. With no real news, at the start of June, Shiny Hunters came back from retirement, relaunching the forum, except this time it would be for sale, asking just $2,500 for the most notorious hacking forum. It was beyond strange, but it was a sale that would never happen, because just 14 days later, a French newspaper had breaking news. The Paris Cybercrime Brigade had just launched coordinated raids across France. They arrested 4 people, all in their 20s, all alleged BreachForum administrators. Their handles: Shiny Hunters, Hollow, Knocked, and Depressed. And buried in this reporting was a detail no one had heard before. A 5th suspect, operating under the alias IntelBroker, had already been arrested months earlier during the winter, specifically on February 22nd, just days after making his Twitter post taunting law enforcement. Acting on intelligence shared by the FBI, officers from the French Cyber Brigade had busted Kai, placed him in pretrial detention, but they didn't share any details of his arrest, if he had been just visiting the country or was actively residing there. Either way, it was now his home, because for the past 4 months, he sat in a French cell as the authorities kept his arrest a complete secret as to not alert the others. And now, with them all busted, the US Department of Justice unsealed the charges. For the first time, the world learned who IntelBroker really was: Kai Logan West, a now 25-year-old British national. The DOJ complaint lists 40+ victims, 158 offerings of stolen data, $25 million in damages, breaches of a US telecom company, a healthcare provider serving Congress, an ISP, and dozens more. He faces up to 50 years if convicted on all counts. With this public, the internet did what the internet does best. They dug. Within hours of the indictment dropping, OSINT researchers found his LinkedIn profile under that fake alias Kyle Northern. They noticed it listed him as a security researcher trainee at the UK's National Crime Agency from September to October of 2019. The NCA, the very same agency that had helped take BreachForums down in May of 2024. The same agency whose arrest footage from 2018 shows footage of a blurred out 17-year-old getting arrested for those bomb threats we talked about at the start of the video. The NCA later denied that he was ever a trainee, but researchers from VX Underground received an anonymous tip from someone who claimed to have attended the same university as Kai. They said he was enrolled in a cybersecurity training program as part of reparations for those earlier crimes. It makes sense. Seems like he was underage when that bust happened. That's why his name was redacted in those documents, and instead of facing tougher consequences, maybe they had him agree to do some sort of program like this. But he had never truly stopped. And despite now being locked up, it seems that he was able to quickly get access to a phone, which he first used to contact DoingFedTime, while much of the case details were still unknown. He claimed that he had been living in Russia for some time, and that he had actually been caught trying to cross the Finnish border, then bounced around different European jails while the US and Israel were fighting for extradition.
So IntelBroker had been living in Russia for years, a really kind of classic move for cyber criminals, since Russia doesn't really extradite to the United States and generally leaves you alone if you don't target Russian interests.
It seems now that this was a lie. Well, except for the US fighting for extradition part and the having the phone part. In fact, this past January, a video has surfaced of what appears to be Kai showing off his French prison cell. He's got a work desk, a basic kitchen, a fridge, a window. Like, this is probably what his hacker den looked like anyways all the time that he wasn't arrested. And more importantly, he has a phone with an internet connection. We saw on my video about Ariane Curtage how much damage can be done with this sort of thing, even while behind bars. As of today, BreachForums is effectively dead. Copies keep popping up, but nobody quite trusts them because the chain of ownership has been broken. Meanwhile, the US is still seeking his extradition. As of right now, Kai is still sitting in France, waiting to learn which country will get to decide his future.